Look at you. You turned into a fat, ugly woman." Her husband yelled so loudly that Tiffany covered her ears with her hands. "Look at the person you've become." He grabbed her arm roughly and dragged her to the mirror in the hallway. Tiffany looked at her reflection and lowered her eyes. "You don't like the reflection in the mirror either." Tiffany's husband grinned angrily. "I also hate the fact that my wife has turned into a housewife who works around the apartment in a knit t-shirt and old sweatpants and has gained 10 pounds. Alex, but you were the one who said I should only take care of the household, of our children. You're the one who decided that I shouldn't work. If you remember, I graduated from university and wanted to start a career, but you forbade me. Do you really think you had a chance to succeed?" Alex said confusedly. "No, you would be just a stupid accountant with a miserable salary." He laughed. "But our home would not be tidy. The children would be hungry and wear dirty clothes. But at least you wouldn't reproach me for being a housewife who is always begging you for money. I give you enough money, Tiffany. It's more than enough to go to the beauty salon, to the gym, to buy new clothes. Where do you spend that money?" "Well," Tiffany looked guiltily at her husband. "Billy lost his cell phone again, and I had to buy him a new one. And Christina wanted to buy some new clothes. She can't dress worse than her friends. Christina already has too many clothes." Alex got angry. "And Billy doesn't seem to appreciate the things his parents buy him. He loses his cell phones every month, and you keep buying him new ones. I think he should spend a month without a phone. We should teach him a lesson." "But Alex," Tiffany freaked out, "he needs to communicate with his friends, and we should be able to call him at any time." "Okay, I'll give him my old cell phone." "Billy," he called loudly to his son, "come here." A well-fed boy came out of the room with a disgruntled expression on his face. "Bring the phone your mother recently bought you," the man said sternly. "Why?" Billy wondered, but did not argue. Soon, he came out of his room again and handed his father the phone. Alex pulled out a SIM card from it and immediately inserted it into his old phone and handed it to his son. "What is this?" Billy said indignantly, hiding his hands behind his back. "I don't need this old phone. All my friends will mock me. You only need a phone so that your mother knows where you are and to ask about your homework, not to brag to your friends." Alex looked at his son sternly. "So, for now, you will use this old phone. Besides, it works perfectly fine." Billy looked at his father with hatred. "If it works perfectly fine, then take it for yourself." Billy was about to cry. "And give me my new phone back." "New phone, which you'll lose again," his father said sarcastically. "No, you have to learn to appreciate everything I do for you. Then I don't need a phone at all. I'm not going to take this old junk." Billy ran to his room sobbing. Tiffany rushed after him, but her husband's menacing shouts stopped her. "You raised him to be like that. He's just a consumer who gets everything easily. You're his father. You could participate in your son's upbringing too, instead of shifting all the responsibility onto me." Tiffany tried to object. "I earn money to provide for our family." Alex raised his voice. "Maybe I should put on an apron and cook dinner." He grinned. "You are a mother, and you should instill in our children respect for their father. Tell me, does your daughter help you in any way with the housework?" "Christina has her final exams at school, and then she will be preparing for university," Tiffany replied quietly. "She is very tired. I don't want to bother her." "Seriously?" Alex grinned. "Your daughter is constantly hanging out until late at night and often comes to my office to ask for money. Christina needs some rest too." Tiffany continued to defend her daughter. "Yes, she wants to hang out with her friends and dance. She's a teenager. There's no point in talking to you," Alex said. "You'll regret spoiling our children like that. You don't know how to spend money wisely. From now on, I will only give you money for groceries." He went out into the hallway and began to put on his shoes. "Where are you going?" Tiffany became alarmed. "It's your day official. I was going to make lunch and thought we'd all eat together like a normal family. I have some work to do." Alex replied briefly and walked out of the apartment. When Alex left, a worried Christina entered the room. "If Daddy won't give you much money, then I'll be left without a beautiful dress for prom," she screamed, almost crying. "Sweetie, don't worry." Tiffany began to soothe her. "I actually saved up some money. We'll go to the store and buy you a prom dress. I already found a pretty cute one for you." "Pretty cute?" Christina teased her, with some old-fashioned pattern. "No." Tiffany shook her head. "The dress is beautiful. A delicate pink color, with a puffy skirt below the knees. You want me to look like a child at my prom?" The girl got angry. "You never had any taste in clothes. You were always buying ridiculous clothes for Billy and me. At my prom, I want to look attractive so all the guys will only pay attention to me." "What are you talking about?" Tiffany said in confusion. "A girl should be modest and shy. It's the only way to meet a decent man. I'm sick of your moralizing." Christina defiantly put on her headphones and left for her room. Tiffany sighed heavily. "Billy," she peeked into her son's room, who was sitting at the table playing another computer game. "Would you like some snack? I made your favorite oatmeal cookies and fresh berry drink. Don't you see that I'm playing?" The boy didn't even turn to her. "Don't disturb me. Just bring the cookies here and then close the door." Tiffany hurried to the kitchen and soon brought Billy a plate of cookies and a drink. She placed the tray on the edge of the table. Billy didn't even turn around to thank his mother, continuing to play his computer game. Tiffany stayed by his side for a while and then, seeing that her son wasn't paying any attention to her, left the room. "No one needs me in this family." She looked sadly out the window. Tiffany didn't understand why her husband had suddenly fallen out of love with her. After all, when they married in their last year at university, they had been madly in love with each other. But Alex's parents, or rather his mom Sophia, didn't like Tiffany right away. Tiffany's mother-in-law thought that her son deserved a better wife than this simple girl. Tiffany tried to please her mother-in-law in every possible way. She cleaned the apartment, cooked, and even when she was in the last month of pregnancy, the woman continued to scrub the floor, do the laundry, and cook every day. When Christina was born, Tiffany and Alex moved into the apartment that Sophia had previously rented out to tenants. She let them live there simply because she was tired of the constant baby crying and bottles of baby formula on the kitchen table. Sometimes Sophia came to visit them, not to play with her granddaughter, but to reproach Tiffany. Her mother-in-law claimed that Tiffany didn't cook well, that the apartment wasn't tidy, and that her son lived in unbearable conditions. Tiffany always made excuses that the baby was taking up all her time and she didn't have time even to sleep. Christina was often sick and cranky. Tiffany couldn't stand the fatigue anymore, but there was no one to help her. She was left an orphan early. Her parents died when she was 14. It happened in winter. They forgot to turn off the gas stove, went to sleep, and suffocated. That night, Tiffany stayed at her aunt's house, and when she came home in the morning, at first, she didn't even understand what had happened. Her mother usually woke up before everyone else to make breakfast for the whole family. That morning, it was already 10 a.m., but her parents were still asleep. Tiffany walked over to the bed to wake them up and she screamed loudly and then ran to her aunt's house. After the funeral, Tiffany was adopted by her aunt. The house where Tiffany and her parents used to live was demolished and a new building was built in its place. When Tiffany graduated from high school, her aunt persuaded her to move to the big city and apply to university. "What are you going to do here?" Vivian persuaded her niece. "It's impossible to find a normal job here. There are even no normal guys here. Honey, go to another city and try to start a new life. But remember, you can always come back to me. My home is your home." Tiffany did well at school, so she passed the entrance exams and was accepted to a good university at the Department of Economics. She visited her aunt during breaks and reluctantly went back to her dormitory. Then she met Alex and started to visit her aunt less and less often. Eventually, she stopped traveling to her hometown and only wrote letters to her aunt. Tiffany really wanted to visit her aunt, but Alex forbade it. He wanted his wife to forget that she used to live in a remote town. Sophia often scolded her son for not marrying the girl she had chosen for him. She didn't even go to Vivian's funeral because she was pregnant, and Alex wouldn't let her go alone. He'd been busy with something and hadn't been able to drive her there. Tiffany cried so hard that she almost ended up in the hospital with premature labor. She promised herself that when her children got a little older, she would take them to her hometown and show them the places where she grew up. However, time passed, and her daughter was already graduating from high school. But Tiffany never visited her hometown. Now she felt ashamed that she had never visited the graves of her relatives. She wondered what had happened to the house she had lived in with her aunt. Probably there was nothing left of it. Tears ran down her cheeks. "Mom, I'm hungry." Tiffany flinched when she heard her daughter's voice. Tiffany replied without turning around and hastily wiping away her tears. "There's pasta and meatballs on the stove. Grab a plate and eat." "What do you mean?" Christina was indignant. "You always set the table yourself and call us to the table when everything is ready. And anyway, I just painted my nails. I can't even get a plate." Tiffany turned, looked at her daughter, and grinned. "Nothing will happen to your nails if you grab a plate. If you're really hungry, set the table yourself and eat. You're not a baby anymore." Christina stared at her mother, not understanding what had happened to her. "In that case, I'd rather stay hungry," she said, and walked out of the kitchen. Tiffany turned back to the window again and looked out into the yard where the children were playing. "My gosh, what have I turned into?" She ran her hand through her hair. "A pathetic housemaid who has to serve everyone. No one cares about me. Sometimes they don't even notice me. If I die, they'll only notice it when they realize no one made dinner." "Mom," she heard the voice behind her again. Her son walked into the kitchen. "Give me some money. I want to buy a new computer game." "Honey," Tiffany said affectionately, "I don't have any extra money. I need the money I have left to buy a dress for Christina. I think she can live without a new dress," Billy said angrily. "She has enough outfits, and I just need a new computer game." "Billy," Tiffany tried to reason with him, "we'll buy you a game next time. I need it now." The boy stamped his feet. "Do you understand? Now, if you give him the money now." Christina ran into the kitchen and pointed her finger at her brother. "I'll leave and never come back," she said, glaring angrily at her brother and her mom. Tiffany sighed exhaustedly, not knowing what to do. She would probably have to call Alex and ask him for money. She could lie that she decided to listen to his advice and buy herself a new outfit. "Okay," she said tiredly. "Now I'll call your dad and ask for money, and then we'll go to the store and buy what we need." "Deal." The children calmed down and went to their rooms. Tiffany picked up the phone and dialed her husband's number. She listened to the dial tone for a long time. Finally, her husband answered in a disgruntled voice. "Why are you calling me?" he asked quietly. "I told you I'm busy. Let's talk when I get home." Tiffany was about to voice her request when suddenly she heard a soft female voice. "Honey, where are you? Your kitty is already waiting for you in bed. Come to me, sweetheart." Tiffany couldn't believe her ears. Her husband had long ago ended the call, but she was still holding the phone and couldn't move. "Mom, when are we going to go to the store?" Christina tugged on her arm demandingly. "You promised." "We're not going anywhere," Tiffany whispered, sinking down on a stool. "Daddy refused to give you money." Christina clarified. "Wait, I'll call him myself. He never says no to me." "Don't call him." Tiffany looked at one point. "He has an important meeting right now." "Important meeting in Sunday?" Christina grinned. "He's probably with Alice right now." "With who?" Tiffany shifted her gaze to her daughter. "Alice, his personal assistant." Christina kept talking, not realizing how much pain she was causing her mother. "She's so cool. I met her when I came to Daddy's office. She even gave me some of her clothes. I wish I could be like her. She's so beautiful." Christina smiled dreamily. How do you know they're dating? Tiffany continued to stare at her daughter. I saw them in a cafe together. They were kissing, and then they got in the car and drove off somewhere. That day he didn't spend the night at home. He told you he was going on a business trip. Why didn't you tell me anything? Tiffany jumped up from her stool and started pacing the kitchen. How could you? Do you realize that you betrayed your mother? What's the big deal? Christina shrugged. Every man has a mistress, and my dad is very handsome. Plus he's a boss. He needs a beautiful, well-groomed woman by his side. Oh my gosh. Tiffany wrapped her arms around her head. I can't believe my daughter is saying this. So are we going to the store or not? Christina asked as if nothing had happened. Tiffany didn't answer anything but headed into the bedroom. Locking the door, she sat on the bed, not knowing how to go on with her life. The phone rang in the kitchen, and Tiffany hurried over there, hoping it was Alex calling, who would say it was a joke, that he still loved only Tiffany and would be home soon. But the display showed her friend's name, and Tiffany reluctantly answered the call. Are you standing at the stove cooking dinner for your family again? She heard Natalie's cheerful voice. Why don't you take your mind off the housework and talk to your best friend? Natalie said happily. I'm not doing anything. Tiffany's voice sounded indifferent. I'm glad you called. Natalie, I feel so sick. Should I call an ambulance? Her friend was alarmed. Are you in pain? My soul hurts. Tiffany sighed heavily. It hurts so much. Oh. Natalie didn't ask any unnecessary questions and only said, let's meet in half an hour at the cafe near your building. There you'll tell me everything. Deal? Yes. Tiffany nodded her head as if her friend could see her. Tiffany returned to the bedroom, dressed quickly, and 15 minutes later left the apartment and headed toward the cafe. Natalie was already sitting at a table and examining the menu. I guess this is going to be a very unpleasant conversation. Let's order some whiskey, she said, saying hello to her friend, and some appetizer. And then we'll see how the conversation goes. Natalie forced Tiffany to drink the whiskey in one gulp and waited silently. After a glass of whiskey, Tiffany felt a little better and told her what had happened that afternoon. I suddenly realized that no one needs me. I've lived all these years only for Alex and the kids. I didn't think about myself, my desires and feelings. I only tried to please them. Tiffany said with tears in her eyes. That's your biggest mistake. Natalie sighed. Alex and your children treat you like a housemaid. They only need you to make their lives comfortable. Natalie covered Tiffany's hand with her own. I'm sorry, but you've raised your children to be selfish, and your husband has simply lost interest in you as a woman. I wanted what was best. Tiffany covered her face with her hands. I tried to take care of my family and didn't ask for anything in return. Natalie gestured to the waiter and asked him to bring them some more whiskey. Tiffany, what would you really want for yourself? Natalie asked suddenly. Well, Tiffany hesitated. I want Christina to pass her final exams and get into university. I want Billy to. No, Tiffany. I asked what would you want just for yourself? Natalie interrupted her, raising her voice. I don't know. The woman whispered. I've never really thought about it. Well, it's time to think about it, Natalie said. Is there something that you've wanted to do for a long time, but you haven't dared to do it? I'd like to go to my hometown. Tiffany looked at her friend and her eyes lit up with a happy sparkle. I was thinking about it today. Sounds great, Natalie rejoiced. Pack your bags. I can't. Tiffany got frustrated again. What are the kids going to do without me? Besides, Alex won't let me go anywhere. Tiffany, come to your senses. Her friend sighed. This is your life, and if you don't change, your husband and your children will continue to treat you like a slave. Stop living for someone else. Do something that you want. For the first time in your life. I don't think I can do that, Tiffany replied uncertainly. I can't just leave everything and run away. Who's going to take care of my kids and husband? They can take care of themselves, Natalie replied sharply. They're not babies. Let them get used to being independent. Well, okay. Tiffany nodded her head in agreement. I will go to my hometown after Christina passes her exams and applies for university. No, Tiffany, you're going there tomorrow, Natalie said firmly. And not for just a few days, but for a month. Tomorrow. Tiffany was horrified. But I can't. I have to pack my bags, cook something for my husband and children, fill the refrigerator with groceries, do the laundry, iron some clothes for Alex. Don't they have hands? Or they don't know where the grocery store is. Natalie was annoyed. It's time for your family to learn to take care of themselves without your help. But where am I going to live there? Tiffany tried to cling to the last chance to stay home. I don't have any relatives left there. You'll find a place to live when you arrive. Natalie paid for the drinks, leaving a generous tip for the waiter. I'll pick you up tomorrow morning and take you to the bus station. But what will I tell Alex? Leave him a note that you left to find the meaning of life. And when you find it, you'll come back. Natalie hugged her friend. Tiffany, dear, you have to do that. Otherwise. She fell silent. Well, let's not think of the worst. Do you have some money? I have some. But I wanted to buy a dress for Christina's prom. Let Alex buy it. Natalie grumbled. He'll finally realize how hard you've worked all these years. She laughed gloatingly. Natalie, what if something happens to them while I'm away? Tiffany shook her head. How will they cope without me? At least, they will start to appreciate everything you have done for them. Natalie worked her friend home. I will pick you up at 6 a.m. while everyone is asleep and take you to your new life. Don't take much stuff with you. You won't need much in a small town. Though you have almost nothing anyway. You haven't bought anything for yourself lately. Saying goodbye to her friend, Tiffany opened the front door and entered the hallway. The apartment greeted her with silence. She walked through the rooms and saw that the kids had gone somewhere. Walking into the kitchen, Tiffany stopped and sighed heavily. The table was stacked with dirty dishes that the kids hadn't even put into the sink. There was juice spilled on the floor and cookie crumbs everywhere. Instead of starting to clean it up, Tiffany suddenly became angry. Natalie is right. Her family considers her just a pathetic housemaid. The woman decided not to clean the kitchen. Instead, she pulled a small suitcase out of the closet and started packing it. Then she put the suitcase back in the closet to keep it out of sight, and then turned on the TV and watched a movie instead of cooking dinner. Soon, she heard a noise in the hallway. Billy entered the apartment, took off his sneakers, and threw them in different directions. Tiffany wanted to get up from her chair and run into the hallway to put her son's shoes away, but stopped herself. Mom, bring me some juice. Billy's voice came from the room. But Tiffany pretended not to hear. Bring me juice. Her son's demanding voice came again, but louder. He didn't even say please. The woman fought, not moving from her seat. Mom, do you hear me? Billy came out of the room and looked at his mother grudgingly. I told you to bring me juice. If you need juice, Tiffany replied calmly, then go to the kitchen and pour yourself some juice. I don't need anything. The boy turned around and went to his room, slamming the door loudly. There was noise in the hallway again. Christina returned and tripped over her brother's sneakers and shouted, What the hell? Mom, why didn't you put Billy's shoes back where they belong? Tiffany didn't even turn her head, staring at the TV screen. Mom, I was just at Lizzie's and tried on her prom dress. Can you imagine? I couldn't button it. I'm fat, Christina said in frustration. She thought her mother would try to comfort her as she usually did, but Tiffany remained silent. Christina looked at her mother in bewilderment and said crankily, I need to lose some weight. Make me a vegetable salad. After saying that, she went off to her room. Tiffany sighed and turned off the TV, but she didn't go into the kitchen. She took a book from the shelf, lay down on the couch, and opened the book. After a while, Christina walked into her room again. I'm hungry. Did you make me a salad? She asked impatiently. All the ingredients are in the refrigerator. Tiffany replied in a calm tone. Get everything you need and make the salad yourself. What do you mean? Her daughter became indignant. If I cook anything, I'll ruin my nails. Then I'd rather starve to death. Tiffany shrugged and continued reading her book. Christina stayed there for a moment, not understanding what was going on with her mother, and then went back to her room. Tiffany felt sorry for her children. She wanted to comfort them, to feed them, to hug them, but now she looked at them from a different perspective. She realized that it was her fault that they had grown up so selfish. She walked into the kitchen. The dirty dishes were still on the table. Tiffany pushed them to the other end of the table, made a cup of coffee, and sat down on the chair near the window. It was scary to leave everything and go to the unknown because no one was waiting for her in that remote town. Would her husband cope with the children? Would her children understand what their mother had done for them? And most importantly, would anything change when Tiffany came back? She had so many questions in her mind and not a single answer. Maybe she should talk to Alex first, as she used to do. Though, Tiffany knew his reaction in advance. If he had another woman, he could ruin their family in an instant. And then Tiffany would be left all alone with two selfish children without any money. Perhaps Natalie was right. Tiffany needed to leave to keep her family together, to think everything over, and make the right decision on how to live her life. She went back into the room and lay down on the bed. Tiffany could hear her children walking into the kitchen, opening the refrigerator and rattling the dishes, but they didn't ask their mother for anything yet. Tiffany dozed off and woke up when she felt her husband lying down next to her. It was completely dark outside the window. The clock showed 2 o'clock in the morning. Alex fell asleep. Tiffany could smell expensive feminine perfume on him. After waiting a little longer, Tiffany slowly got up so as not to wake her husband and went into the kitchen. There she sat by the window in the dark and stayed there until morning. Then she made coffee, ate a sandwich, and wrote a note as Natalie had advised. She took her suitcase out of the closet, quietly opened the front door, went out, sat down on a bench, and waited for Natalie. To be honest, I was sure you'd change your mind. Natalie got out of the car and opened the trunk. I'm surprised you are already outside. I left the apartment early. I was afraid someone would get up and see me, and then I'd have to stay. Tiffany replied quietly. Well, it's time to start your adventure. Her friend started the car. You'll come back absolutely happy. At least, I really hope so. It was half an hour before the bus that would take Tiffany to her hometown would depart. Give me your phone. Tiffany obediently handed Natalie her cell phone. Take this. She handed Tiffany a small old-fashioned phone. I inserted a new SIM card in it, with only my phone number on it. But how will I communicate with my children? Tiffany asked, confused. What if something happens to them? Don't worry. Her friend reassured her. I'll call you every day and tell you they're fine. And I'll call Christina today and tell her to call me if anything happens. What are you going to tell her about me? Tiffany was concerned. What if she assumes I abandoned her and Billy? Calm down, Tiffany. Natalie laughed. I'll tell her that because they didn't appreciate their mother, she decided to leave for a while, to get some rest and think about the meaning of life. Come on, get on the bus or it will leave without you. Tiffany took a seat by the window, waved to Natalie, and the bus moved off, taking her to her hometown. Tiffany dozed off and woke up only when the bus was approaching her hometown. She grabbed her suitcase and got off at the bus stop with a few other passengers. Tiffany hesitated for a moment, looked around, and then walked forward down the main street. The woman wondered if anyone was renting an apartment. She walked through the town and marveled at how it had changed and how beautiful it was now. The day was very hot and sunny. Tiffany walked along and looked at the buildings. She saw a red brick house. The woman remembered that the mayor had once lived there. A wooden house was nearby, and it looked abandoned. The gate was hanging on one hinge, and the windows were boarded up. It had once been the home of a large family. Tiffany attended the same school with one of the family members and even was in love with him. Before looking for an apartment to rent, Tiffany decided to go to her aunt's house. What if it's still there? She walked to the gate and couldn't believe her eyes. A clothesline was stretched across the yard, and clothes were drying on it. "I don't understand," she said. "Who can live here?" The woman opened the gate and entered the yard. A small dog ran up to her and began to bark loudly. "Doggo, stop it. Why are you barking?" A petite, skinny woman came out onto the porch and stared at Tiffany. "Who are you? What do you want?" "Sorry." Tiffany stepped back. "I must have the wrong address." She looked around again. A lot of things had changed in the yard, but she recognized the birch tree near the house. "The thing is, I used to live in this house with my aunt, Vivian." "What's your name?" "Tiffany." The woman was surprised, covering her mouth with her hand. "Tiffany, please, come into the house." The woman immediately invited her inside. Tiffany walked up onto the porch, entered the large room, and looked around. "When did you remove the fireplace from here?" she asked, remembering how much she loved to sit by it in winter. 5 years ago." The woman looked guiltily at Tiffany. "To be honest, we just didn't need it. By the way, I never introduced myself. My name is Rachel. Please take a seat at the table. I'll make some tea." "Can I look at the other rooms?" Tiffany asked. "It's been so long since I've been in this house." "Of course," Rachel agreed cheerfully. Tiffany entered the room that was separated by a thin wall. It used to be one large room, but when Tiffany had moved here, Aunt Vivian had asked a neighbor to divide the room into 2 parts. There was a bed where her aunt slept, a dresser and a sewing machine in one half of the room, and a small sofa and desk in the other half, where Tiffany had settled. Now, nothing much had changed in Vivian's room, but in Tiffany's room, there were 2 small beds with toys on them and children's drawings on the wall. Tiffany went back into the kitchen and sat down at the table. Rachel poured the tea into cups, put a plate with pie on the table, and sat across from her. "Tiffany, you're probably wondering who we are and why we live here." Rachel looked at her questioningly. "I believe Vivian has told you about us in her letters." Tiffany realized that she had actually received a letter in which Vivian had told her that she had let a family who had no place to live in her house. "Yes, I remember something about that." Tiffany rubbed her forehead. "But I didn't pay attention to it. Your aunt was very kind and friendly," Rachel continued. "She was like a mother to us. My family and I lived in another country. But my husband got into trouble because of his job, and we had to move. I left all my relatives there and came here with my husband and son. People advised us to go to a small town because it was easier to find a place to live here. We expected to find some abandoned house. But on the way to this town, on the bus, we met your aunt. When she found out about our situation, she offered us to stay in her house because she was very lonely. We gladly agreed. My husband, Sam, got a job as a driver the very next day, and I got a job at a local farm. Vivian offered to look after our son, Max," Rachel said proudly. "She treated him like her grandson. And then, when Vivian got sick," Rachel sighed heavily, "we were taking care of her." "What happened to her?" Tiffany asked quietly. She was ashamed that some strangers were taking care of her aunt, and she didn't even know that Vivian was sick. "Honestly, I don't know." Rachel shrugged. "Doctors have given different diagnoses. All I know is that she had heart problems. She worried about everyone and felt sorry for everyone. And she waited for you, Tiffany, until the very last moment. She kept saying, 'When my Tiffany comes to me, I'll get better.'" Tiffany covered her face with her hands and cried. She suddenly fully realized that she had lost the most precious person in her life. A person who loved her sincerely and who needed her. She had lost her beloved Aunt Vivian. "Can you show me where she is buried?" Tiffany jumped up from her chair. "I need to apologize to her." "Sure." Rachel put her hands on her shoulders, settling her back in the chair. "But later, I need to cook dinner. My sons will be back soon, and my husband promised to stop by for lunch. But she was silent for a moment. Tell me honestly, Tiffany, you're here to sell the house, right? Tiffany frowned her forehead and looked at Rachel in confusion. What are you talking about? I didn't even think about that. I actually thought this house had been demolished a long time ago. I came here just because I haven't been here for a long time. Besides, I need to get some rest and think about my life. That's why I came. I don't plan on selling the house. I'm very grateful to you for taking care of my aunt. So this house is yours. I will find an apartment to rent today. Rachel exhaled in relief, but immediately became worried again. Don't even think about looking for an apartment. Stay here. My husband and I will move into the living room, and you can stay in our bedroom and live here as long as you want. This house is yours. Tiffany thought for a moment and agreed. Thank you. I'll stay. But you and your husband don't have to move anywhere. I'll sleep in the living room. Besides, when I was younger, I really liked to sleep there. I used to come home late from the disco, and so as not to wake Aunt Vivian, I'd sleep in the living room. Both women laughed, feeling relieved. Rachel gave Tiffany a towel. Tiffany went to take a shower, and Rachel started peeling potatoes. Tiffany joined her in half an hour, and soon a delicious dinner was ready. After a while, Rachel's sons came home. Max, the oldest, and Peter, the youngest. Max works as a driver. Rachel looked at her oldest son proudly, and Peter goes straight to him almost every day after school and tries to help him. He's already pretty good with machinery and wants to be a driver too. When the boys finished eating, they thanked their mother for dinner, cleaned the table, and even washed the dishes. Tiffany looked at this with her mouth open in astonishment. Your kids washed the dishes and cleaned the kitchen. She looked at Rachel in bewilderment. Why does that surprise you? Rachel shrugged. They know that they have to take care of mom and help her with household chores. It's common in our family that I cook dinner, and the kids and husband wash the dishes, scrub the floor, and sometimes do the laundry. Tiffany wanted to ask another question, but a tall, handsome man entered the room. This is my husband, Sam. Rachel introduced him. Sam, this is Tiffany, Vivian's niece. Nice to see you. Sam shook Tiffany's hand. Aunt Vivian has told us a lot about you. Tiffany will live with us for a while. Rachel placed a plate in front of her husband. I hope you don't mind. No, of course not. Sam began to eat quickly. You can live here as long as you want. Besides, you are Vivian's relative, so it's your house. When he finished eating, he also washed his plate, grabbed his backpack, and ran off to work again. I need to go to the farm now. Get some rest, and when I get back we'll cook dinner together. Rachel gave Tiffany the key in case she wanted to leave the house. Tiffany decided to take a walk around the town and stop by the local store to buy some groceries for Rachel and her family. The woman walked down the familiar street, looking in every yard, hoping to meet someone she knew, but she didn't meet anyone. Then she decided to go to the cemetery. She quickly found her parents' graves and stopped in front of them. It was noticeable that someone was taking care of the graves. Tiffany looked at their pictures, but she didn't even cry because it had been a long time and the pain of their loss had subsided. Tiffany looked around and suddenly saw Aunt Vivian's picture. It was as if she could feel her gaze that looked reproachfully at her niece. The woman walked over to the grave and knelt down in front of it. Aunt Vivian, my dear, forgive me for not visiting you for so long. Tears were streaming down Tiffany's face. I know you waited for me and believed I would come. She stood in front of the grave for a long time, talking about her life and asking for advice. But all she heard in response was silence. When Tiffany looked at the picture again, she saw that Vivian's eyes had become kinder, and Tiffany suddenly calmed down. She felt relief and peace of mind. At the grocery store, Tiffany bought chocolates, cookies, cake, tea, cereal, and much more. When she put 2 heavy bags on the table, Rachel, who had already returned from work, splashed her hands. You bought too many groceries. There's enough for a whole month." But it was obvious that Rachel was pleased. A little girl ran out of the room and stared at Tiffany. "This is our daughter, Maria." Rachel hugged the girl. "She's going to school next year. But in the meantime, she is attending daycare." Tiffany pulled a candy bar out of the bag and gave it to the girl. "This is for you." Maria took the candy bar and then looked at her mother and put it on the table. "Why don't you want to eat it?" Tiffany asked affectionately. "It's delicious." "I know." The girl nodded. "But Mom always tells me that we should share the tastiest things with our loved ones. So when my daddy and brothers get home, we're going to eat it together. Right, Mom?" Rachel smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, you're right. After all, it is very pleasant to share goodies with your dad, Mom, and brothers and see the joy in their eyes. With this little piece of chocolate, you will give your loved ones love and care." "Rachel, you are an amazing woman." Tiffany marveled. "You educate your children so well." "And I." She fell silent and began to unpack the bags. Rachel looked at her carefully and replied, "Tiffany, I can see you came here for a reason. Are you having family problems? You know what? When I put everyone to bed tonight, you and I will sit on the porch and you can tell me about your family if you want. I'll try to help you, at least with good advice." In the evening, everyone sat down at the table. Tiffany noticed that the atmosphere at the table was so warm and friendly. Everyone talked about their day. Even little Maria talked about some interesting things that happened at the daycare center, and everyone listened to her carefully. Then Rachel and Tiffany began to clean the table, while the men washed dishes and did other chores. But the thing that surprised Tiffany the most was that little Maria took the mop and began diligently scrubbing the floor. "Your family is so friendly and hardworking." Tiffany marveled again. "I can see how much you love and cherish each other." "Yes, we do. We always support each other no matter what happens." When everyone went to bed, Rachel and Tiffany went outside. At first, they gazed at the stars in silence. And then, Tiffany said, "It's so peaceful, so quiet here. And your family is wonderful. I even envy you a little. My husband doesn't appreciate me at all. My children are selfish. I never get any help from them." She sighed again. "No one needs me at all." Rachel put her arm around Tiffany's shoulders, and Tiffany told her everything that was going on in her family. Rachel listened carefully without interrupting her. When Tiffany had finished her story, they sat in silence for a while. "My parents actually were against me dating Sam." Rachel began to speak quietly. "They didn't want me to marry him. They insisted that I marry the son of our neighbors. He was the one my father wanted as his son-in-law. But I fell in love with Sam. When my parents found out that I was dating him, they even tried to lock me up at home so that I wouldn't be able to go out on dates. However, I disobeyed them and married Sam. At first, we lived in a dormitory, and then we rented a small apartment, where our first son Max was born. At first, we had some misunderstandings, but we loved each other and tried to discuss all our problems. I was raised in strict traditions and customs, so from a young age, I was oriented on creating a family and having children. I was instilled with respect for my man. I try to support him in everything, but I don't forget to take care of myself too." When he got into trouble because of work, Sam and I didn't know what to do. He offered to move to another country, but I didn't want to leave my home, my relatives. I couldn't stop crying. My parents said it would be better if Sam went abroad alone, and I stayed there because no one knew what awaited me in another country. One day, Sam came home very anxious. I realized that we couldn't wait any longer. We decided to leave that very night. That's when I realized the value of our family. I promised myself that we would love, respect, and support each other always and forever. Sam appreciated what I did for his sake by moving far away from my family. He helps me in everything and constantly tells our sons that they have no one dearer than their mom, and therefore they should appreciate and help their mom. My family is the most precious part of my life. I love my husband, my son, and my daughter too." Tiffany looked up at the starry sky. But I don't get that love in return. Or maybe you just stopped loving and respecting yourself. Rachel asked quietly. If a person doesn't respect themselves, but only tries to please others, everyone around stops respecting that person and only demands more and more. Has your husband been rude or even abusive towards you? Tiffany nodded affirmatively. Did you justify it with fatigue? Or problems at work? Or maybe you even blamed yourself for not doing enough for your husband? Rachel continued. Tiffany nodded again, and then it just kept escalating. He criticized you for everything he could. Your face, your body. He wasn't interested in what you were doing. He didn't help with the housework. Tiffany lowered her head, tears streaming down her face. She even thought that Rachel was a clairvoyant because she was so accurate about her relationship with her husband. You say you love your husband. Rachel stood up and paced from side to side. But how can you love a man who abuses you, humiliates you, who is rude, mean, and by doing so, he sets an example for your children, who also disrespect you? Children are not guilty of selfishness. They just copy their father's behavior. And I wouldn't be surprised if you justify this attitude too, thinking you have nowhere to go, no job, and no money. If you say he loves you, he just doesn't realize what he's doing. Am I right? Tiffany was already crying hard, covering her face with her hands. Rachel was telling exactly what was going on in Tiffany's family. What am I supposed to do? Tiffany asked, sobbing. First of all, calm down. Rachel sat down next to her again and put her arm around Tiffany's shoulders. And think twice about whether or not you really want to keep a family like this. It's always scary to change things in your life. But sometimes it's necessary in order not to lose yourself. The fear of change prevents you from taking care of yourself, from creating normal living conditions, not only for yourself, but also for your children. How do you know all this? Tiffany wondered. It's like I'm talking to a professional psychologist right now. Actually, you are right. Rachel smiled. I am a psychologist by profession, but I never managed to make it a career. Now I prefer to work on the farm. However, the knowledge I gained at university and my life experience helped me in difficult situations. How lucky I am to have met you. It seemed to Tiffany that she and Rachel had known each other for a long time. Tiffany loved living in the small town. During the day, she helped Rachel with household chores, worked in the vegetable garden, went with her to the farm, and every evening, they sat on the porch, had tea, and talked about life. Tiffany loved these therapy sessions and looked forward to the quiet evenings when she could look at the stars and just talk. Natalie would call her several times a week and tell her that Alex and the kids were fine. However, at first, they were very angry when they found out she had suddenly left, and then they started to miss her. Christina called Natalie every day and asked when her mom would be back, and Billy even cried. He missed Tiffany's car and love. Can you imagine? Natalie said. Christine even asked me how to make dinner and wash Billy's shirt. Did my husband ask about me? Tiffany asked cautiously. He was trying to find out where are you and why you turned your phone off. Natalie laughed. But I only told Alex that if he doesn't change his attitude towards you, he will lose you forever. Tiffany stayed with Rachel and Sam for 3 weeks. She could have stayed longer, but she really missed her children. On the bus, Tiffany thought about the words Rachel had said to her as she said goodbye. Once you realize your own uniqueness, 2 things will happen. Either your husband will change his attitude toward you, or you will realize that he will never change. In that case, leave him without regrets and start a new life. She returned home fully confident that she would not live her life as before. Firstly, she would get a job, and secondly, she would no longer indulge the whims of her children and husband. If Alex wouldn't like it, Tiffany would file for divorce. She also realized that everyone in the family should be equal and live happily, helping and supporting each other. She didn't know yet how she would build relationships with her children, but she realized that it wouldn't be the same as before. When she entered the apartment, her entire family immediately ran out into the hallway. Mommy, Billy and Christina rushed to hug her. "Where have you been? We missed you so much." "I missed you too." Tiffany kissed her children. "And worried about how you were doing here without me." "We're fine." Alex handed his wife the slippers. "Or rather, we are not fine without you. Don't leave us anymore, please. We really need you as a housemaid." Tiffany said wearily, as a beloved wife and caring mother. Her husband reassured her. "We're going to help you with all the housework from now on, and with everything else too, because we realized how hard to work just to make sure that we lived a comfortable and good life. By the way, we have a surprise for you. Let's go to the room." Tiffany entered and looked around. The room was tidy, but she saw nothing new. "Look down," Alex whispered. Tiffany lowered her eyes and saw a puppy sitting on the floor looking at her with his big eyes. "Who is that?" She almost cried with joy. "This little guy's name is Winston. You've always dreamed about a dog. I remember you telling me that when we get married." Alex looked at his wife tenderly. "And now, your dream has come true. Now we'll work with him in the park together." Winston stood up on his little paws and walked across the room, then suddenly sat down and made a little puddle under him. Everyone laughed, and then Billy got a rag from the bathroom and wiped up the puddle. Tiffany took the doggo in her arms and hugged him. "Yes, we have to love our lives," she exclaimed, "no matter what happens."